There's something different about people who don't own a smartphone. Maybe it's the way they make eye contact that lasts a few seconds longer than feels normal now. Maybe it's how they can sit in a waiting room without reaching for anything, just existing in the space without apparent discomfort. Or maybe it's that strange quality of being fully present in conversations, while everyone else is half listening for the buzz in their pocket. Because choosing not to own a smartphone in 2025, or never having owned one at all, doesn't just change how you communicate. It rewires something fundamental about how you process reality, manage attention, and navigate the texture of daily life. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see why living without that rectangular screen has created some of the most psychologically distinct people in the modern world. Let's start with something most people completely miss. We assume smartphones are neutral tools. You can use them well or poorly, but they don't fundamentally change who you are. But here's what researchers are discovering. The constant availability of infinite information, the persistent possibility of interruption, the habit of filling every empty moment with content. These don't just occupy your time, they reshape your neural pathways, your attention span, your relationship with boredom, uncertainty, and solitude. People without smartphones aren't just doing the same things differently. They're operating with a completely different psychological architecture. Picture this. You're at dinner with friends, maybe 2019, maybe earlier. Everyone's phone is on the table. Someone mentions a fact. When did that movie come out? What's that actor's name? And 5 hands reach for 5 devices simultaneously, except yours, because you don't have one to reach for. The conversation pauses while everyone searches. You sit there, watching this synchronized behavior that looks almost choreographed. Nobody thinks it's strange except you. Or maybe you're the one who just kept your flip phone when everyone else upgraded. Your friends joked about it at first, then stopped mentioning it. Or maybe you had a smartphone once, felt that constant pull, that automatic hand-to-pocket movement 50 times a day, and one day you just stopped. You downgraded. Went back to a basic phone or no phone at all. Whatever path brought you here, there was a moment. A moment when you realized other people couldn't sit through a meal without checking. Couldn't watch a movie without second screening. Couldn't be alone with their thoughts for 30 seconds in an elevator. And you looked at that pattern and thought, I don't want that. That specific choice, or non-choice, marks you as psychologically different from the start. What researchers call intentional friction in technology use is something you've built into your entire life. Dr. Larry Rosen's work at California State University found that people check their phones every 3 to 4 minutes on average, not because of notifications, but from anxiety about missing something. You've opted out of that checking loop entirely. This isn't Luddite rejection of technology. It's what psychologists call technological selectivity, choosing tools based on whether they serve you, not whether they're ubiquitous. And that act of selection, of swimming against the cultural current, shapes everything that follows. This creates adults who trust their own judgment over social proof, who can say everyone else is doing something and still choose differently without anxiety. When you've spent years being the only person in the room not reaching for a device, you've built what researchers call autonomous decision-making capacity. The ability to choose based on your values rather than mimicking the crowd. You're not paralyzed by fear of missing out because you've tested it. The world didn't end when you couldn't immediately photograph that sunset, look up that fact, or respond to that message within 30 seconds. Now, let's talk about what a typical day actually looks like when you're living in a world designed around constant connectivity without participating in it. It's Tuesday morning, and you're taking the subway to work. Every single person in your train car is staring at a screen, scrolling, watching, typing. Faces bathed in that particular blue light. You're the only one looking around at actual humans. You notice things they don't. The elderly man with the interesting hat. The teenager practicing dance moves thinking nobody's watching. The advertisement that changed from yesterday. You're not better than them. You're just present in a space they've essentially vacated. You know the feeling of their experience because you've seen it everywhere. That protective cocoon of content that makes public space feel private. That careful curation of the commute where podcasts and videos and messages block out the uncomfortable randomness of being surrounded by strangers. But you're in the randomness. You're feeling the train's movement, hearing the announcements, existing in real time with no mediating device. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you wish you had something to do with your hands. But mostly, you're just here. And somehow that simple fact, just being present in physical space, has become a radical act. Neuroscientist Dr. Adam Gazzaley's research shows that task switching and constant partial attention literally reduce your capacity for deep focus. But it does something else. It trains your brain that empty moments are problems to be solved. You've maintained what researchers call environmental awareness, the ability to process your actual surroundings rather than living in a digital overlay. Your default mode network, the part of your brain active during rest and mind wandering, gets regular exercise. That's where creativity happens, where problem solving occurs, where you process experiences and emotions. You've become someone who can think on a long walk, who processes emotions in real time rather than scrolling them away. Who notices when someone seems upset instead of assuming if it were important? They'd text. You're not necessarily happier, but you're present for your own life in ways that are becoming increasingly rare. When smartphone users describe feeling like life is passing them by, like they're not quite present for their own experiences, you understand what they mean because you've seen it. But you're not in that space. You're here. But being present becomes most obvious in social situations, where everyone else is half present at best. You're at a party. Someone tells a story. Halfway through, 3 people pull out their phones. Not because they're bored. They're still nodding along. They're just checking. The muscle memory of reaching for the device every few minutes. You watch this happen so often, you've stopped being surprised. Mid-conversation, mid-story, sometimes even mid-sentence, the phone comes out. A quick check. Maybe they're responding to something urgent. Maybe they're just reflexively looking. They put it away, re-engage, then 30 seconds later, someone else's phone emerges. You're the only person giving the storyteller complete attention. And here's what's strange. You've noticed the storyteller gravitates toward you. They make eye contact with you more. They direct the story to you because you're the only one fully receiving it. You're not judging the others. You understand the pull they're feeling, that anxiety about missing something somewhere else. But you're not splitting your attention between this moment and whatever might be happening in your pocket. You're just here, in this conversation, with these actual humans in front of you. Social psychologist Sherry Turkle's research reveals that the mere presence of a phone on the table reduces the quality of conversation and connection between people. But what she found more interesting is that people don't even realize they're doing it. The behavior is so normalized, it's invisible. You've developed what researchers call undivided attention capacity, increasingly rare in a world of continuous, partial attention. And that capacity creates deeper relationships because people feel truly seen by you. They feel listened to in a way that's become uncommon. You've become someone people seek out for real conversations. The friend people call when they need to actually talk something through, not text about it. You're building relationships with a depth that's harder to achieve when half the interaction happens through screens. This isn't superiority. Plenty of people with smartphones have deep relationships, but you've noticed that your friendships tend to have a particular quality. Less frequent contact, perhaps, but more substantial when it happens. You're not maintaining relationships through constant lightweight pings. You're building them through actual presence. Consider what happens in those moments everyone else fills with scrolling. The waiting, the downtime, The supposedly empty moments. You're waiting for a friend who's running 20 minutes late. You're sitting on a bench in a coffee shop. No phone to check, no device to fill the time. Just you and 20 minutes of existence. At first, maybe there's that reaching feeling, the ghost limb sensation of wanting to check something. But then it passes. You watch people. You think about the conversation you had earlier. You notice the architecture of the coffee shop. You overhear a fascinating snippet of dialogue from the couple behind you. Your mind wanders to that problem you've been working on, and suddenly you see a solution you hadn't considered. This happens to you regularly now. Waiting rooms, lines, early arrivals, delays. All the moments everyone else disappears into their phones, you're just existing. Sometimes you bring a book. Sometimes you just sit. And what surprises people when you describe this is that you're not bored. Or rather, you are sometimes, but boredom doesn't feel like an emergency anymore. It feels like space. And space, it turns out, is where your brain does some of its best work. Dr. Sandy Mann's research on boredom reveals something counterintuitive. Boredom is essential for creativity. When your brain isn't being fed constant stimulation, it starts making novel connections. The default mode network activates, the mental state associated with insight, problem-solving, and self-reflection. Smartphone users rarely enter this state anymore, because every potentially boring moment gets immediately filled. You've maintained access to what psychologists call constructive internal reflection. Your brain hasn't learned that every unstimulated moment is a problem requiring an immediate digital solution. You solve problems in the shower, on walks, in waiting rooms. Ideas come to you during these supposedly empty moments because your brain still knows how to activate its creative networks. You've noticed that smartphone users often describe feeling mentally foggy, like they can't quite think clearly anymore. You don't have that fog because your attention hasn't been fragmented into thousand-piece puzzles. You're practicing what researchers call sustained contemplation, the ability to think about something deeply without interruption. In a world where that's becoming rare, it's becoming valuable. But perhaps nowhere is the difference more stark than in how you navigate the physical world without GPS, instant answers, or photographed memories. You're meeting someone at a new restaurant across town. You look up the address before you leave. You might print directions or write them down. Then you navigate there using street signs, landmarks, and occasionally asking strangers for help. There's a moment of uncertainty at every turn. Did I miss the street? Should I have turned back there? You're using your spatial reasoning, your memory, your observation skills. You're building a mental map of the city in real time. Sometimes you get lost. When that happens, you ask someone. You interact with an actual human to solve your problem instead of consulting the device in your pocket. And later, when someone asks you how to get to that restaurant, you can tell them. You remember the route because you had to pay attention. Your friend with the smartphone went to the same place last week and couldn't tell you how to get there because they followed a blue line on a screen without processing the actual streets. They were passengers in their own navigation. You were the pilot. And that distinction matters more than it seems. Cognitive neuroscientist Hugo Spears found that GPS use shrinks the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for spatial memory and navigation. When you outsource navigation to devices, those neural pathways atrophy. You've maintained what researchers call spatial cognitive mapping, the ability to form and maintain mental models of physical space. This skill connects to broader cognitive abilities: problem solving, memory formation, orientation in complex systems. You're not just remembering streets, you're keeping entire neural systems active that smartphone users are inadvertently letting decay. You're someone who can find their way, who trusts their sense of direction, who doesn't panic when the technology fails because you never learned to depend on it completely. You remember experiences more vividly because you were present for them, navigating actively rather than passively following directions. When people describe feeling disconnected from places, like they've traveled somewhere but don't really remember it, you understand, but you don't have that problem. You remember the journey, not just the destination, because you were actually present for every turn. But let's be honest about what you're actually experiencing. The fear of missing out, the anxiety about being disconnected. Something important happens. A news event, a viral moment, a social drama in your friend group. You hear about it hours later, maybe days later. Everyone else knew immediately. They were watching it unfold in real time. And here's what's interesting. You don't feel left out. Or maybe you did at first, years ago, but now you don't. Because you've learned something through repeated experience. Most urgent information isn't actually urgent. Most breaking news breaks the same way tomorrow. Most social media drama resolves itself or becomes irrelevant before you even hear about it. What you miss isn't important information. It's the communal experience of everyone reacting simultaneously. The shared jokes that happen in real time. The memes that spread before you see them. But you've discovered something. The truly important stuff finds you anyway. Real friends tell you things. Actual news makes its way to you. The rest, the endless stream of content and reactions and manufactured urgency, you're just not carrying that weight anymore. And the relief is more substantial than the loss. Dr. Andrew Przybylski's research on fear of missing out found that it's not actually about missing events. It's about anxiety over your social standing and belonging. Smartphone users experience this constantly because they can see what everyone else is doing at all times. You've broken that loop. What psychologists call temporal anxiety. The fear that something is happening right now that you should know about simply doesn't apply to you anymore. You've trained yourself out of the urgency addiction that keeps most people checking compulsively. You've become someone who trusts that important things will reach you, who doesn't live in constant low-level anxiety about missing something. Smartphone users describe feeling enslaved to their devices, feeling like they can't put them down. You don't have that master-slave relationship with technology because you never formed it. This all adds up to something profound. You're not checking anything compulsively because there's nothing to check. And that freedom from compulsion, from the nagging feeling that you should look at something right now, might be the most valuable psychological difference of all. That freedom extends beyond information access into something deeper. Freedom from performing your life for an audience that isn't really watching. You're at a concert. Everyone around you is holding up phones, recording, watching the show through screens. You're just watching it, experiencing it directly. And when it's over, you have no photos, no videos, no proof you were there. Except you do have proof. You remember it. You remember it vividly because you were actually present, not managing a device. Your hands were free. Your attention wasn't divided between experiencing and documenting. The show happened to you directly, not mediated through a screen. And later, when people post their videos, you notice something. The footage is shaky, the audio is terrible, and they'll probably never watch it again. They were so busy capturing the moment they missed the moment. You didn't capture it, but you didn't miss it either. You were there. This pattern repeats everywhere. Beautiful sunset? You look at it. Great meal? You eat it. Interesting conversation? You have it. Nothing needs to become content. Nothing needs to be shared. Nothing needs to be curated for an audience. Your life isn't a performance. It's just your life. Let's be honest about what this doesn't mean. You're not more virtuous because you don't own a smartphone. You use computers, probably use the internet, likely use other technologies. And there are costs. Real costs. You miss invitations sometimes. You can't quickly look up information that would genuinely be useful. Sometimes people get frustrated with you for being harder to reach. This isn't a perfect choice, it's just a different one. But what emerges is a specific psychological profile. People who've maintained cognitive capacities that are rapidly eroding in the general population. Who can focus deeply in an age of fragmentation? Who can be present in an era of constant distraction? Who can tolerate uncertainty in a culture addicted to instant answers? You're living proof that these capacities aren't lost to modernity. They're just optional now. That's the psychology of people who don't own a smartphone. And maybe, just maybe, understanding this psychology matters. Because you've proven something everyone else is starting to suspect. You don't actually need to be connected to everything, all the time, to live a meaningful life. You just need to be connected to what matters. And knowing the difference between those two things might be the most valuable form of intelligence available in the modern world.